Go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nationalist Academy. I'm Cole. I'm here with Thomas and Uber, and this is going to be our third episode. We are going to do our classic book reviews here in the first part, and in the second part, we are going to open up the talk to general philosophical chats. I believed that during this podcast, Uber's wife was going to be with us. She is not, so I picked a particularly short thing. Uber, I believed, picked no book once again, and Thomas, you picked a particularly long book, I believe.
Yes. It was
You
long.
picked Crime and Punishment?
Yes. But specifically a new translation, which I recommend to everyone. Don't get the Barnes & Noble version. You barely understand it. Get a good translation. Do a little research. You'll appreciate the book much more.
Alright, do you want to go first with your review?
Why not? All right. So I've read the book before, full disclosure. So this was rereading it with a fresh mind in a new situation in my life. So basically it's the story of a guy who, because of circumstances, ends up dropping out of college in St. Petersburg in the 1860s, which is not a really good time to be a dropout. And he lives under someone's stairs in a boarding house, which was a common mode of living at this time. Packed in like a sardine, he's got this one closet to himself, and he just sits there miserably all day. And he convinces himself, because he's read a lot of philosophy, and he's come to the conclusions that were predominant at that time, he convinces himself that it's a good idea for him to, or it would be not morally reprehensible for him to kill a pawnbroker who he has been dealing with, because all she does is leech off of the society around her. Of course, that's him looking at things from his own perspective and from his own bias. He then proceeds to act on his fantasy of killing this pawnbroker lady. In the process, her sister barges into the room. Her sister is described as being a little out there or a little different, what we today would assume as autism. You know, in 1860s Russia, they had no concept of this. They didn't care. She was just weird, and she lived with their sister.
You heard it here, folks. In 1860s Russia, there was no autism. Truly, it was a paradise.
Well, was it? Because look at what our autists give us today.
You're right. It was an absolute dystopia. We need to spread autism here in America.
Give them more vaccines. Just ask Alex Jones. Anyway, so let's not turn this into the woke folk. Back to
the woke folk will eventually eat all podcasts.
And do Alex Jones memes in the process. So he kills this woman, and he is particularly taken with the look of horror in her eyes as she knows and realizes that he is about to kill her. Bludgeons her to death as well. Slips out when the workmen probably could have noticed him but didn't, and proceeds to go on a 300-page guilt trip that is unlike anything anyone's ever written in literature. Clearly Dostoevsky had some issues himself, because ooh boy does he bring out some very jarring examples of the way that depression affected this individual. He became so depressed that he would just frequent bars with whatever little money he could scrounge up. He's still not able throughout the book to recognize what is causing him to go through this existential crisis. He starts to interact with the police in a way that if you were actually trying to hide the crime, you wouldn't do at all. He starts going to the police saying, oh, I was in the area, I was one of her customers, giving them the clues that they would need to shut the case on him. In the process, he befriends one of the investigators, as well as he befriends a man who is a former servant of the Russian government who's currently broke and has his daughter prostituting to pay for his wife and younger daughter, while they all live in a house with about 40 Germans that are described in very colorful and upsetting language in that book. As someone who descends from them myself, just saying. If that triggers you, don't read the book, because you'll get very triggered. But it makes sense in the cultural context of the times. It makes sense from the character's perspective. It wasn't just wanton. So he befriends the daughter specifically, and he ends up falling in love with someone who is, even to people who have very loose morality, is reprehensible. This girl who's prostituting herself, but what he sees in her is the beauty of her doing this act that defiles her as a person so that she can feed, sacrificing so that she can feed her family. that reminds him of his particular religion, because apparently, and it's very clear in Dostoevsky's writing that he was very Christian, but apparently Raskolnikov has that inkering too. Something about the times and kind of the fatalism of Russia in this era really draws that out of the characters, to say the least. And so when he's in significant peril, he begins to start to walk back towards the light, so to speak. In this process, he ends up basically giving himself to the police after a series of very interesting events, including his very weird friend and his family that come in from Siberia to see him because they think he's still in school. They end up seeing a guy who's depressed laying in a room all day. The friend actually has made a lot of money, so the friend kind of adopts his family, and he's like, okay, goodbye. And then he gets arrested, and he goes to Siberia himself, back to his homeland, I suppose. And the prostitute girl, after her father is killed being run over by a horse, which is not supposed to be funny in the book, but kind of is. He gets run over by a horse because he's too drunk and he can't do anything about it, and he just stands there like a deer in the headlights, which is kind of the character. He dies. She comes out to live beside the prison with the other, like, with the wives of people who are imprisoned in these camps, waiting for him as he becomes very, very aware of the sins of his past and very adamant towards the end of the book about how, his guilt was what was holding him down, which was obvious the entire book. You killed someone, dude. Of course you're going to feel guilty about that. You're not, A, used to it, and B, you're too moral because you think about these things. So if anyone out there is thinking about killing people, don't. You're just going to give yourself away to the police. Not a good plan. And that Crime and Punishment touches the thing that draws me to that book, and the thing that I like about that book is it has both the very human aspect of like the anime of living in a society that's modernizing and not quite knowing man's place in it and asserting man's place too far, and then being naturally kind of like smacked by reality, as well as like I think the Christian overtones in that book are really, really important because they can speak outside of just that particular faith to a kind of like ancestral understanding that we should not do things that harm other people, especially within our own communities, because it's something that would, if it was done to us, we would feel very horrible about. And that's kind of the interesting like overlay of Christianity in this situation. When he starts to return to his faith, he starts to see things from the perspective of the pawnbroker, saying, God, I wouldn't want that to have been me, to just get beaten to death by some random bearded guy who stinks, who hasn't washed himself in 3 months because he's so depressed he just lays in a room all day. So yet again, Neats, please get out of the house. You're not helping us.
Get out of the house, but don't get out to bludgeon people.
Yeah, oh God. Especially not the person who's been paying for your rent with the gold watches that you've been pawning off to him. Sounds like a very New York situation, to be honest.
A very kosher situation. But anyways, alright, so what were like... Besides the golden rule, what other philosophical concepts do you see within like the book and the narrative?
Very early in the book, weirdly enough, because he wrote the book before Friedrich Nietzsche was really on the scene, he starts talking about a series of conclusions the character is coming to that Nietzsche eventually came to in his work. That this like idea of I am strong, therefore I am entitled to act, the will to power, so to speak. And just like, which is the same theme actually that came out of the last fiction book that I read, which was Heart of Darkness, which is kind of why I picked them in that order, was that these people came to this conclusion kind of naturally, the product of like a particular kind of charisma, a zeitgeist, if you will, of that time. Not that god-awful documentary, but like the actual zeitgeist of the time started leading people towards these conclusions that Nietzsche fleshed out more thoroughly in the coming decades. But at the time were just kind of like the scattered thinkings of various academics here and there. He had written papers when he was in college that were actually published because they were quite good about how he felt that he was morally superior to other people because he thought above them, which is very common. If you know a lot of smart people, they all think that, even if they won't admit it. Not necessarily a good thing when you're applying that to direct interpersonal relationships. And that's another interesting and relatable aspect of that book, at least for me personally, is you can see Raskolnikov dealing with the fact that he is just a normal human being. And it wears on him quite extensively, more so than it would anyone else because it's dramatized for effect, obviously. But a really interesting way of him showing like how man relates to society, especially in that particular society with all that was going on. Just a few years before the book opens, the serfs had been liberated. Like Russia was going through great changes at that time. It seems like it's always going through great changes, especially in modern times. But things were changing in Russia. Russia was turning into a new place, and people were getting left behind, at least emotionally, in that process.
Mm-hmm. And that's very true. Uber, you did not read a book, but what are you planning on reading for next week?
Oh, I could also do an audiobook. That might make it a little easier for me. It's just that I just started this week, so this week is pretty hectic.
Welcome
But you
back to hell.
suggested, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
You suggested I could start picking up essays.
Mm-hmm.
That might make it a little easier for me.
Any kind of writing is okay for this thing as long as it's, politically relevant and, not deep
Not
is,
really like
is just a
news
hipster.
oriented, just
Yeah,
more like
deep is a very hipster way of putting it, but things that, aren't just shallow.
Right.
yeah, yeah. Now we're becoming the white nationalist hipsters.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad
I'm just tired of
hipsters
reading
have just,
shallow
died
things.
as a movement.
Oh,
Right.
not on the West Coast, son. Yeah, I don't know what you're
They're
talking
still there,
about.
but they're not in the national spotlight anymore. We don't see any more. We see more people in the kind of intersectional feminists applying all these extra labels, but we don't see any more non-political hipsters. Just like the common man being like, "Oh, I listen to Fish CDs while I play with my Chia Pet" or something.
Oh,
Right, they're the
God.
ultimate expression of apathy within our society, and as things become more dramatically politicized and polarized, I think we'll see less and less of those kind of groups springing up, especially that particular group that wants to live as children still.
Well, I mean, that's just the far left in general. I mean, I
Right.
absolutely love Kant's his little, it's, I don't remember where it's from, but it's his talk on immaturity and what immaturity means, and I think it applies a lot to the left, and I can quickly bring it up and read it. HJK. Here we go. I'm just going to read this little passage from Kant on immaturity, and although he is considered classical liberal, outside of his political stuff, I do think he is really damn close with morality and other kinds of things. I mean, listen to this and tell me if you don't think it sounds pretty damn trad. Laziness and cowardice are the reasons why so great a proportion of men, long after nature has released them from alien guidance, nonetheless gladly remain in lifelong immaturity, and why it is so easy for others to establish themselves as their guardians. It is so easy to be immature. If I have a book to serve as my understanding, a pastor to serve as my conscience, a physician to determine my diet, and so on, I need not exert myself at all. I need not think. If only I can pay, others will readily undertake the irksome work for me. The guardians who have so benevolently taken over the supervision of men have carefully seen to it that the far greatest part of them regard taking the step to maturity as very dangerous, not to mention difficult. Having first made their domestic livestock dumb, and having certainly made sure that these docile creatures not take a single step without the go-cart to which they are harnessed, these guardians then show them the danger that threatens them, should they attempt to walk alone. Now this danger is not actually so great, for after falling a few times, they would in the end certainly learn to walk, but example of this kind makes men timid, and usually frightens them out of all further attempts. I think this is, very characteristic of, kind of the authoritarian left that we're seeing. I mean, the establishment of the Guardians and purposely warning against, stepping out and becoming, financially successful without relying on their systems of diversity and public relations and everything like that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. When you listen to that, it sounds like just a literal description of basically the neoliberal establishment. That people. I mean, I don't know. It's almost kind of a meme at this point when a lot of people refer to people as sheeple or whatever the fuck. But it's essentially true in people's nature when you think about it. Like most people, if they have their needs taken care of, for the most part, they're pretty content to leave things as they are, even if they're not for the ultimate long-term good, or even more subtly, like their ultimate philosophical or ideological good, like the a more, I don't know, cultural good.
Their fulfillment
especially.
of their duty
Right,
as a categorical
their
representative of their personhood.
self-actualization and all that sort of thing.
Exactly. In a hedonist society where you set up all you need is bread and circuses, keep people entertained and fed well, and you basically have all their problems, all their problems pushed aside in their minds. And
Yeah. The
and if we
Romans
have
thought
nothing
they were
else,
immune.
yeah, and if we have nothing else, I think we should go on to my thing. Now, what I did is, again, I thought Uber's wife was going to be here, so I picked a particularly short kind of essay thing, and I looked into specifically Falangism. I looked into the Spanish version of fascism, and it is still fascism, but it's interesting to note that they were trying to distance themselves from the fascist movement at the same time. Reading their 26-point manifesto of the Spanish Falange, which means phalanx in Spanish, they are in particular trying to distance themselves from fascism, while at the same time they are trying to reject Marxism and also appease like these very same like promises that the Marxists are promising. So there's only 26 points, and I think we could go into them, and I'm going to actually read them out quickly, and there's a few points that I think we can discuss. I mean, we're going to agree with the majority of this for Spain. It's specifically tailored for Spain, but one of the concepts that needs to be understand with this is their idea of syndicalism. Now, in Marxist theory, when the proletariat sees the means of productions and establish a dictatorship of the proletariat, the idea is that all the proletariat, all the workers, they form a state, and then that state becomes state socialist and organizes the workers to work the various machines and fields and everything like that. In syndicalist economics, instead of the fascist system where it's corporations and companies going before a fascist council to determine whether it's economically benefit to the state or not, in syndicalist economics, they basically have these trade unions. They have what they describe as vertical trade unions. So all of the all the tailors are in a guild. They're in a syndicate that deals with the government, in the same way that corporations deal with the government in the Italian fascist state, to try to seize the means of production without at the same time having this state-run socialist program. So, like I said, it's not quite a synthesis between fascism and Marxism, because, that's just complete dialectic nonsense. Yeah, it's dialectic nonsense, but at the same time, it's taking fascism and saying, how can we compromise to appease the country? Because earlier they were in a anarchist civil war, and that you can definitely see the influence of them trying to overcome that civil war, not just through dominance, but through a bit of compromise as well. So any of these points, any of us can just stop and say we would like to say something about it, disagree, or anything like that. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. So basically for the first three, it's basically just for Spain and for, not the first three, the first five, just basically for Spain, and a few choice quotes in them are from points 1, 2, and 5 that I'm going to go through. I'm just going to read point 1 in its entirety to get the gist. We believe in the supreme reality of Spain. The strengthening, elevating, and magnifying of this reality is the urgent collective goal of all Spaniards. Individual, group, and class interests must inexorably, I can't pronounce that word, inexorably give way in order to achieve this goal. And a single sentence from the second point is, Spain has a single destiny in the world. Every conspiracy against this common unity is repulsive. Any kind of separatism is a crime from which we shall not pardon. And finally, from the fifth point, it's Spain must aspire to become a great maritime power for reasons both defense and commerce. We demand for the fatherland equal status with others in maritime power and area of roots. Just from, I gave you those excerpts of the first 5 points to give the kind of general. I'm going to do this for each of the sections, but just to give the general, overview of this. And this is specifically for Spain, but we can already see like the kind of inklings, this idea of they are taking the fascist idea of group and class interest and trying to focus them towards this national goal, and that's what the syndicalist economics is. It's basically trying to say we don't want companies and corporations. We want more workers' control of the means of production, but we don't want full-on Marxism, because Marxism is absolutely AIDS.
It's just retarded.
In fact, you see the evidence of syndicalism's popularity in Europe still in the institutions of certain European countries, like in France, where there's a labor union and then there's an owners union, and they discuss with one another as a way to kind of stave off tensions between these groups. Just something I wanted to point out. It's an interesting parallel, the way these things affect history.
And that's also true, and I can also see quite a lot of merit in it, especially with guilds that involve some kind of skills, like, for example, the way that I think our doctors are set up here in America. I believe we have kind of like a doctrinal council dictating what, it's not the way hospitals are run, but I think it's talking about medical practices, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's some kind of...
I think that's correct. It's like there's this sort of union, and it sets sort of like...
And it's not just bureaucrats, it's actual doctors that have, proven their excellence.
Doctors, and it's like if you have to follow this certain set of standards in order to get and maintain your license to practice.
Well, what doctors are really worried about is being like they are sued viciously by lawyers who make.
So it's like if you don't want to follow that code, then you're going to be stripped of your fucking license.
Right. Thrown to the wolves.
It's kind of the same with I just had it in my head. Never mind. But there's another industry that operates almost exactly. Oh, lawyers.
Yeah.
Operates almost exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
Too.
And that's why they hate each other, because they're so similar.
The bar and so forth.
And the next section is state individual liberty, and basically we can see the full manifestation of fascism here in this very first point that I'll read in its entirety. Our state will be a totalitarian instrument to defend the integrity of the fatherland. All Spaniards will participate in this through their various family, municipal, and syndical roles. There shall be no participation in it by political parties. We shall implacably abolish the system of political parties and all their consequences, inorganic suffrage, representation of clashing groups, and a parliament of the type that is all too well known. And funnily enough, the next point of this, I'll skip point 8, but human 7, if you were kind of politically and philosophically just ignorant as the common man, this part would seem almost contradictory, but it explains itself. Human dignity, integrity, and freedom are internal, intangible values. Now that just sounds like something straight out of like a classical liberal, manifesto right there, but it goes on to explain. But one is not really free unless he is a part of a strong and free nation. No one will be permitted to use his freedom against the nation, which is the bulwark of the fatherland's freedom. Rigorous discipline will prevent any attempt to envenom and disunite the Spanish people, or to incite them against the destiny of the fatherland. So this is where, they kind of explain this. They're saying that you can have all the freedom you want, but not the freedom to subvert your own homeland, which is, very intuitive that it's a part of a fascist doctrine that, yes, it's totalitarian, and we can disagree on that as National Socialism, I personally think, is superior to fascism, especially in its economics. And
demonstrably so.
Yes, but again, it's this idea of the totalitarian state. It's not so much the idea that they want to suppress and, just, be a tyrant of their own people, and whether you're cynical of not of particular leaders, but in concept, the idea is supposed to be the state, creating the society and organizing it in such a way to create more unity, to actually benefit the particular people. The next part in particular is long. It consists of points 9 to 16, which talks specifically about the economy, labor, and class struggle. And I'll only go over two of these particular points to illustrate it. It's our concept of Spain in the economic realm is that of a giant syndicate of producers. We shall organize Spanish society cooperatively through a system of vertical syndicates for the various fields of production, all working towards national economic unity. And the second point, which is point 10, actually addresses their kinds of, condemnations at the same time compromises with Marxism. We repudiate the capitalist system, which shows no understanding of the needs of the people, dehumanizes private property, and causes workers to be lumped together in a shapeless, miserable mass of people who are filled with desperation. Our spiritual and national conception of life also repudiates Marxism. We shall redirect the impiousness of the working classes who today are led astray by Marxism, and we shall bring them into direct participation in fulfilling the great task of the national state. It this is one of the things that if you've been listening to Sargon of Akkad recently, he's kind of been getting into the idea of class struggle and everything like that, or maybe I'm thinking of some other YouTube, but he's been getting into this idea of class struggle that he doesn't advocate Marxism, of course, and everything like that. He's better than that. He's still a classical liberal, but at the same time, he says that the needs of the working class people just aren't being empathized with by the bourgeoisie, as he puts them. And I really don't like concept of bourgeoisie and proletariat within both wings of and all our ideologies, but it does have some merit with the way he describes them of being cultural interest groups rather than economic groups. Yes, it ties into economics and everything like that, but this idea that...
Right. I would almost kind of refer to them more as elitists.
Yeah, but it's not so much as elitist. The way that he defines the bourgeoisie that's defined by Rousseau is people who, when they are alone, want to look at other people, and when they're with other people, want other people to look at themselves. They are those who want to look at others and be looked at in return. They're the people who do everything for status. They want to seem to be empathetic and virtuous, and virtue signal to others, and in return they want to see the virtue signals being sent back to them as well. And we can kind of see this compromising in this point 10. They say, yes, there is a problem with the working class and having exploitation from capitalism and everything like that, and so we're going to provide a solution, but Marxism is not the correct way in this. And while I don't agree, I think it's definitely an interesting system to conceive of. I'm going to skip over the next few points because they all concern land. It's very Marxist, but it's a part of the benign parts of the Communist Manifesto of trying to the next few parts all the way to 22. They basically are about farmers and farming, about for example, point 19, our program of social reforms in the field of agriculture will be achieved by redistributing arable land in such a way to revive family farms and give energetic encouragement to the syndicalization of farm labor. It's basically going on this idea of trying to create more farmland, trying to give interest-free loans to farmers and everything like that. I mean, that's one of the most benign parts of Marxism. Do you agree? The idea of trying to make as much use of as much land as possible for farming.
Well,
Yeah,
it
I
also
mean,
makes
that's-
sense to me from the standpoint of the victor's dilemma. He just took over these people took over a very fractured country. They're gonna have to do some things to appease the other side because they definitely can't survive another civil war. So I think there's probably a little bit of that filtering in there, and some intellectual honesty where you go, maybe these people aren't wrong about everything. Let's look at some of this and see what works, or let's try some of this. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, a certain level of that is present in almost every form of government. Even in like social democracy and so forth, but it's softer forms of like not Marxist socialism, I guess, if you even could qualify them as such. Even
Yeah, I
like
agree. I think it's
FDR did a lot of that kind of shit. It's pretty basic for a government that it wants to like have some sense of taking care of people.
I agree. I only bring it up because because of the very document itself contrasting itself with Marxism and such like
Yeah.
that, and it was one of the points
It
of the
is
Communist
also
Manifesto. I can't quote
yes.
exactly, but it was basically the reforming of arid lands into
Yeah,
farmland.
right. It ends up as collectivized farms in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, but for them, they want to
Um,
restore the family farm instead.
right.
And also a few other things. They want
Actually,
to give interest-free loans to farmers, and also to as they put it, undertake a relentless campaign of reforestation and livestock breeding, and we shall severely
right.
punish those who resist it. It's kind of funny the idea who would really resist the idea of reforestation and livestock breeding.
I don't know.
Fuck
But
your forest. We want
it's kind
desert.
of
We have people in this country that oppose that. We have a whole bunch of them.
it's yeah, it's fucking
The
ridiculous.
cows are farting
But-
the earth to death. We must stop
Oh
this.
god.
And that's one of the arguments I have against like the vegans who say we need to end the farming industry and everything like that. I'm like, okay, you can stop
So
eating
end the
meat and everything
livelihood
like
of
that.
farmers.
However, at the same time, in this country we have like hundreds of millions of cats. They are not herbivores, they're not omnivores, they specifically eat meat. So if you eliminate all meat production, including fishing and everything like that, you're going to have a severe famine and mass dying off of cats. If you want your cats to live, you have to have some level of meat production still there, and if you cut out the human consumption of meat, then you're going to have a much, the market's going to shrink,
Yeah.
and you're going to have an incredibly hard time buying cat food for that same price. It's
Yeah,
going to
watch the price
yeah,
of cat food.
exactly.
fucking
So either way,
quadruple
if
at
you
least.
give up meat and try to, shrink the meat market, the cats are going to suffer along with it. It's not just that you don't need to eat meat; the cats do need to eat meat as well.
And who is the only thing on the earth that likes you when you become one of these people? Cats. And you're gonna kill off the cats?
I think like is a bit of a strong word. I think they tolerate them for food. But
If
I don't know.
Cats are more fucking fashy than these hipster douchebags. I mean, they're willing to go out and
Yeah,
kill
they
your
really-
prey and hunt. I doubt any of these people have killed anything in their
fucking-
life.
they will eat you if you die in your house.
Have you watched the light flicker from a fucking mouse's eyes as you murdered it? I don't think so, fucking soy man. Fucking fascist shit, cat.
I know, and
But-
I read on like probably some cat facts thing or something a long time ago, but when a cat brings you like a dead bird or something, it does it because it doesn't see you hunting and thinks you're a retarded cat. So it brings you food because
Right.
it thinks you're retarded.
I've actually read that before, that dogs see us, they don't think that we're dogs. They see us as a different creature that's like higher than them for some reason. They have this weird almost worship of the human species.
They were bred to.
And
Mhm.
They were
Huh?
bred to feel that way about
Yes,
us.
they were bred to feel that way about us. But cats are not really like domesticated in the same sense that dogs are.
No.
They're like more like tamed in a way. So cats don't see us as some kind of gods or masters. They see us as like big, hairless, really bad cats. They just think that we're cats that are bad at being cats.
In a way,
That's
in a way,
literally
their
how they
relationship
think
kind of
us.
embodies like what the anarcho-capitalists want. They literally only associate with us for mutual gain, and outside of that, there's no love or unity in between us.
No, there's no actual like affection or whatever. I mean, in the other direction, anyways. I don't know.
Sometimes
People
some
love their
cats,
I guess.
some
but-
specific instances of cats actually do care, but they're a
Yeah,
rare
I
breed.
guess.
Mm-hmm. But
And
it's
they're
not.
usually not
But
the
it's not
cats
in
people like.
principle like the dog-human relationship. It's in circumstantial.
Right. It develops over time with the dog. It's a survival mechanism. The dog understands very quickly that, oh, I need to suck up to this creature.
But insofar as like I don't know, like farming benefits and so forth, like yeah, that's pretty actually common amongst different forms of government. But there's another interesting thing I wanted to mention on that topic, I guess, since we started talking about that, and you said it was interesting because of the sort of take from basic Marxism or
Aqueducts.
whatever.
We need to set up
Or-
aqueducts
or-
across the United States, above ground Roman aqueducts.
Yeah. Yes, I agree, absolutely. But it's also interesting to bring up because if you, and this is a great example of this specifically, if you actually read the fascist literature, like the programs and the books and so forth, where they explain their programs and what they're doing and why they're doing it, like it really kind of seems like they actually care about taking care of people. So I mean,
Weird.
But fascism is only bad, right?
Oy vey, don't forget about the 6 gorillion.
I would argue that the worst fascist country in World War II was Japan. I mean,
Oof, yeah.
I mean,
kind of harsh.
yeah, like the Asians have a tendency to be very, cruel to one another, and their imperialism was genuine imperialism.
It was
Fascism
it was
in
pretty rough.
Italy had the excuse of trying to restore the glory of the Roman Empire. The fascism of Spain was to restore unity within Spain and reestablish themselves as a maritime power in the world.
Honestly,
but with Japanese imperialism, it is very much fuck you, other Asian people. Japan is best. This us. This us now. This us.
Well, and it was
Right.
also like, fuck you,
Because
Europe. Look what we can
Germany-
do better.
Because Germany really gets a lot of fucking bad flack that they don't deserve. Because if you think about it, like they didn't really do anything other than reassert the historical territorial claims, and other than annexing all of Czechoslovakia. And when they were even trying to invade Poland, if you think about it, like Prussia has some level of historical claim to most of the land of Prussia, if not like damn near all of it. So the only reason they ended up conquering half of Europe is because half of Europe fucking declared war on them when they invaded Poland.
And I actually talked with Isaac Cohen on Twitter, who's a neocon interventionist, about World War II and everything like that, and I said that was tactics. When they invaded France, I brought up the specific point. They didn't annex France into the German Empire. What they did is they installed a puppet government and
Set up a puppet
they
government
tried
that
to
wasn't at
encourage
war with
French nationalism. They said, you're not Germans, you are French, therefore you need to elevate yourselves, to a French nationalism level. And I brought up this point. If Britain and France, they weren't enemies of Germany, if they instead had been allies, there would have been no invasion of them. There would have been nothing.
There wouldn't have been.
And I even went as far as to say, if the Axis had won World War II, the UK would still be the UK, France would still be France, and at the very most, Germany would have signed some kind of treaty that set up maybe like German military outposts along like the English Channel in key places. They wouldn't have full on like took over
Can
Britain.
you imagine? So here's a fucking funny ass like idea, and it's. Can you imagine if Germany won the Second World War and they had as many global military bases as the United States has now? Like, just in perspective, right? Like, if you think about it, if Germany had fucking military bases, like, all over the world, and, like, Britain, France, fucking America, like, Russia, like, it's insane to think about what the Allies did after the wake of the Second World War and sort of installing
Oy
themselves
vey.
as this,
I
like,
know, they
just sort of
they
overarching dominant world. Like,
I know, it's so
fucking
stupid. They say
order.
Germany
It's
wants to
insane.
wanted to take over the world. One, they already are in the way of the EU, and through economic means they're becoming a regional hegemon.
Power,
And
yeah.
it's like, all right, so you're not willing to do it peacefully, but it's absolutely stupid. Their idea that they're trying to take over the fucking world, it's just simply not the case. America is the military hegemon of the world, and the EU is the economic hegemon of. I'm not going to say of the world, because I would say the three.
Definitely, at least of the Eurozone.
I would say the four big economic hegemons, if we're looking at just economic powerhouses, I would say U.S., Europe, Middle East, and
China.
Asia. I would say those are the big four, and they're the closer you get to the particular areas, the more economic dominance they they hold, and Germany is, of course, behind that European military dominance. I mean, not military, economic dominance. But, anyways, back to the doctrine. It's just really short. There's only a few points left. The 23rd through 25th points are all about. I might as well just read them because they're about education and religion. I think they're pretty good for our modern day. Besides the third one, which is specific to Spain in particular, it shall be the essential mission of the state to attain by means of rigorous disciplining of education a strong, unified spirit, and to instill the souls of the future generations a sense of rejoicing and pride in the fatherland. All men shall receive pre-military training to prepare them for honor of being enlisted in the National and Popular Army of Spain. And I'm going to go quickly over the next 2 points, and then we can come back to that one in particular. Cultural life shall be organized so that no talent will be underdeveloped because of insufficient economic means. All who merit it shall be assured ready access to a higher education. Bernie supporters, we're waiting for you. Our movement incorporates the Catholic meaning of glorious tradition, and especially in Spain, of national reconstruction. The Church and the State will coordinate their respective powers so as to permit no interference or activity may impair the dignity of the state or national integrity. And the final point, it's just basically saying we want all these things to come about. It's the method of procedure will be direct, bold, and combative. Life signifies the art and science of warfare and must be lived with a spirit that is purified by service and sacrifice. Now, back on to the 23rd point. I think that school reform is it's a very, very, very crucial thing. That's one of the things we can agree with Democrats, but the way we want to change it is completely different. Now, I think that for the primary school systems of K through 12, we need to abolish like the standardized bullshit. Common Core, getting rid of that is a good thing, but even the system we have now is terrible. So the idea of K through 12 for me, I think the basic premise would be during kindergarten through maybe third grade, building this idea of cooperation, of what it means to be an American, what it means to help your fellow people, and all these things. Then from third grade to sixth or maybe ninth grade, have this idea of becoming, a self-actualized person, becoming, this is what it means to be an individual within our nation. These are the duties you have to uphold. These are how, and one of the things that I think many people can agree with is creating kind of a how to live life class. I mean, so many times in
how to human.
Well, not even how to human, just basically how to even be a part of this system. So many people in our modern day, they don't know how to file taxes, they don't know how to read laws, they don't know how to they don't know how to contact their congressman, they don't know where you go to, file such and such thing. Basically, that point is talking about, that point in education is all about how you can be a successful person in this system we have. How you can make the most out of everything, how you can develop yourself most as a person. After that, from 9th to 12th, can be kind of the beginning of, vocational support, and specific vocation, not just general, like, you learn just general mathematics course and everything like that. Yes, we all need to learn general mathematics and everything like that. That's one of the few things of standardized education that can be kept around. General mathematics, general earth science and physics and things like that. And history. Basically, the Common Core STEM classes. But when I'm talking about vocational jobs, I'm talking about actually dividing yourself and preparing. Do you want to go into law? Do you want to go into metalworking? Do you want to become a entrepreneur? Starting to separate out these people into the various kind of vocations and giving them real skills that they can apply directly as they get out of high school. Now in the
Yeah.
university or higher, completely different form of education that I think not everyone needs to go to university. I mean, if you just want to get a vocational job and you serve your voc by, creating, metal products and things like that, you just need to graduate through high school and you'll have all the skills necessary, to be a good, helpful citizen engaging in civic life, making and improving your craft. But for the university and higher, of course, law students and things will go there, but I want to restore the Greek and Roman academy method. Love the traditional structure of this is the master, and any in back in the day, anyone who wanted to, they could come and listen. And the people who thrived there were the people who could give feedback and actually talk and actually produce a discourse that both the master and the student learn something, but the student often learns more than it. That it's almost like an open apprenticeship that whatever the master is doing or teaching about, the people there, they contribute to the bettering of that specific trade, such as if the example was history, like the teacher can be lecturing and talking about the traditions and tales and heritages of the past and everything like that, and the student can bring up a valid point about a historical, event happening, not happening, looking at it in this different way, and the teacher validates that by giving legitimacy or a genuine criticism, and both the student and the teacher improve from such a discourse. Now, what do you think of this general breakdown?
Actually,
Yeah. Go
I'll
ahead,
jump
Tommy,
in.
and
I
I'll-
totally agree with you both. Yes, we need to be realistic. There are European countries like Germany and Switzerland that already do this, and we did take their original education model. If anyone is aware of that, it is the Prussian educational model that we continue to destroy to this day.
Kindergarten isn't German?
Yeah, I know. Seriously, I've had to argue that with people who are like, "No, it's not from Prussia." Like, okay, I'm not going to
Yeah,
argue
it's
with you.
fucking German. The Germans invented the welfare state
Yeah.
like 100 years before we did.
Thanks, Bismarck.
And it was way better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, yeah, but and so yes, we need to be especially with primary education. We need to be like making kids think about what is it that you actually want to do. What are you good at? Having that institutional support that pushes them towards their goal, even when they drag their feet because they're children, and that's what children do. Instead of having parents that just go, okay, fuck it, download Snapchat and be a whore. That's fine. I don't care. Also, when it comes to college, yes. To suggest that we need to tell our children for their entire life that they need to go get this piece of paper and go into, in a lot of cases, crippling debt to get this piece of paper that doesn't necessarily really improve their lives, especially with the state that these institutions are in today, unless they are actively working to improve their lives outside of it. They really don't grow from this experience, and if anything, they just get more and more indoctrinated into some very bizarre and toxic worldviews that we're seeing come to fruition now. So I totally agree with you. I actually really do like the ancient Greek method. Good luck finding people that'll do it for free. Maybe that would change the demographics significantly of college professors. Just saying. But that would
I don't
probably-
think
that's a
it
good
has
way.
to be for free. I think it can be men of renown will make themselves known within any system, and thus such people the universities could attract them by financial means of giving lectures, of working in their laboratories, etc. And in order to bolster that particular funding, people naturally want to make connections and also learn from them, and say become an assistant in that laboratory to that particular well-renowned scientist and things like that.
You just validated some old dude at a community college, hardcore dude. Good job. But no, seriously, if you want it, go get it. And that sounds like a very American way to put it, but that kind of is how it is. If you want to be educated, no one can shove it down your throat. You have to actively engage in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was one of those assholes that never shut up in class.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's just my own personal
Yeah.
bias, but
I'm definitely on board with this idea, and like Tommy brought up, there are many European countries who already have a model very similar to what you're
They have
describing.
vocational jobs, but I don't
particular-
think in university they have this Greco-Roman
No,
academy.
they don't have like a
no, they have the
no,
Hebrew
they don't
model.
have like a Socratic
They have very much
model,
lecture, learn, and regurgitate. And at the very, very minimum, they have some applied stuff like, okay, here's a problem that you need to apply all the principle of use learn. That's a step above, but it's not totally up on the point of discourse. And I think what could definitely help in removing the indoctrination part of universities is this idea of discourse. That's not so much that the university lecturer, the master, is speaking down to the student that he needs to accept everything he hears and he needs to, just regurgitate it back on a test. It's this idea that the master provides the general outline of, this particular mastery or specialization, but the discourse between him and the students actually is what provides the real true amount of learning, because the master learns a criticism, whether legitimate or not legitimate, of a particular point or aspect, and the student learns why that particular criticism is wrong or right. If he's wrong, he can learn why he's wrong. If he's right, he actually shows potential for improving that particular craft.
How incredible how far education is strayed away from that model, considering that it's one of its foundational pillars.
Mm-hmm.
Very perplexing to think about. But yeah, absolutely true. The Socratic method, not the way that law schools use it, but the way that it should actually be applied. If you ever read any of Plato's works where he's talking about Socrates just kind of pantsing people, seems to be a very effective way to get to people and something that's enjoyable.
Socrates is the original.
I tried to get my mom to read Lyceum and the Republic and everything like that, and she didn't want to finish it because she just said Socrates was a jerk and didn't make sense.
That's not an
He
argument.
was doing that on purpose. That was how he got people's attention.
I know.
I know. It's one of those things you're like, okay, Mom. Sorry. Wink, wink. Family. Yeah, I gave up years ago trying to even tell them what I'm thinking about.
Fucking boomers,
what are
man.
you talking about?
I gave my father a book on all the wrongdoings the Clintons did while in office, and the next day he just gave it back to me and he said, "Yeah, I know about all this stuff."
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like, well, then fucking do something about it, nigga.
Though, I have known some boomers to start waking up right about now, which is interesting. Seeing that shift in them, I'm like, whoa.
Late is the hour in which the Saxon began to
No
hate.
kidding. 50 years late.
Boomer nationalism.
Oh.
I fucking love that Twitter. They're amazing. Oh, man.
Fucking
Yeah, it's
Bill
very
Mitchell.
satisfying.
Whenever I see his name, I think Machiavelli, but he's not like Machiavelli in any way.
Oh, he's not. Machiavelli would fucking
What always blows me away about the boomer generation's particular criticism of ours, though, is they always criticize us for the way we were raised and how that shaped us into human beings. Like, who are the people raising us? Let's think about this one.
I mean...
it was you. That's right. So you were the one who argued for the participation trophy, and now you're the one complaining about it. I wonder why our country's so destroyed now. Thanks.
It does make one wonder.
Another salient feature I've noticed when I communicate with leftists is they feel very similar about boomers as we do.
Yeah, actually, I think boomers are probably the most universally hated group because they're hated by both leftists and, the dissident right for oddly opposite reasons. Right. Like, the leftists are like, God, I can't wait for all these old people who are way too racist to die. And we're like, God, I can't wait for all these old people who aren't racist enough to die. It's the same thing, just... fucking opposite.
Black people smell terrible, but they should have all the same rights as us, and you shouldn't criticize them.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of illegal Mexican people, but they got their papers, it's fine. It's like, well then, fucking why don't you just stop giving a shit? Like,
yeah, that job that you
own up
paid
to your
for college
racism.
with, working part time. Who works in those jobs now? Oh, yeah, they do.
Or that job doesn't fucking exist anymore.
That too.
This is kind of related, but I really don't like the idea of pensions and fucking insurance. Now,
just in general, or like
no, in principle, I guess these are kind of separate things, but they're they're related for the same point of boomers and retiring. But I'll go into, I fucking hate insurance. It's the biggest fucking scam to me. I got a minor in economics. I know all the economics behind it. I know all about the utility curves and the idea of people in general will be more happy with the safety net and everything like that. But no, I put it down to this in principle. The insurance companies are there to make money. They're there doing something with a particular profit. All the money going into them, they want that money to be greater than what they're giving out. And that goes for everyone in principle. The general idea is when some people suffer, all the others pay into it, and they get their benefits. But at the same fucking time, I look at this and I'm like, okay, if I am the only one who exists and the insurance company is, the only insurance company, if I am paying money into it, I am never going to get the same amount of money I put in that I get out. It seems like all the money that's put in, it would be better put into like an investment. That would be the optimal thing, or at least a savings. Hell, even if you spent that extra money that you would spend on insurance money, just like investing in things like maintenance, in instead of paying monthly insurance, take that monthly insurance and go hire your mechanic friend to just take a look over for your car. See if he sees any problems developing. See if you can fix any kind of cracks or leaks or anything like that. Have a contractor come look at your plumbing. It seems like you could do so much more with the money that you're putting into insurance that would actually help both yourself and the economy at large than the insurance themselves. And that's just super manifest in the Social Security policy, where this idea that the next generation will put in more money than you to pay you off. It's like, no, that you shouldn't rely on the next generation to pay for yourself. Pay for your own thing. Put it in a fucking retirement investment account or something. Put it into a kind of business that'll last and keep giving you money into your retirement. And this goes for pensions too. I don't like this idea of you retire and you stop working. That's the time when you relax until you die. No, you don't have to do a vigorous job. As you get older, that's kind of the time where you grow out of these labor-intensive jobs. I mean, when you're old, you can still do very many things. There are probably some very many ad campaigns where we can still help too and things like that, but you're old, you can write books, you can contribute to arts, you can become teachers, you can do all these other...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is like, why don't we have the older generation like teaching and training and passing their wisdom on down to the youngest generation?
Yeah, and that's very much true, and people can come up with the criticism that when you're older you get dementia and Alzheimer's and everything like that. That's a minority in old people. The vast majority of old people, they are completely competent for their general demographic, I guess is the right word, for their general demographic. They can still produce. They can still, just because they aren't as like sharp in their physical dexterity, and they can't be as physically fit as they were in their youth, they still have a lot they could contribute to both the society, and not even in an economic way, in a very, fulfillment of duty kind of way, with teaching the next generation, with working at like what's the public version of the YMCA? YMCA is a public company. What's like a community center? Is that the right word? Like a community center, like, organizing sports and everything like that. They can still contribute so much, yet they throw all their money into insurance, into Social Security, into all these things of hoping that someone else will pay off their bills. That's why I just hate insurance as a concept.
Right. It's a historical aberration and a market inefficiency that found a niche for itself by creating a set of lobbyists that's very good at walling them off from the effects of normal economic process, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also really interesting to me about people when they're close to death. suddenly they have this urge to spend literally every dime they can get their hands on to live those few extra days. I've never quite understood this. Like, I've seen people who have, like, basically bankrupted their kids' inheritance so that they can live a couple extra months. It's always perplexed me what motivates people to do that, other than, like, that primal terror of death.
They're hedonists who fear the Reaper.
Yeah, that's the best explanation,
Right.
I think. Is that people just, it's like that futile human search for immortality.
But if we had
basically.
a similar approach to our family that we did not even 100 years ago, these issues wouldn't be so relevant. Your parents wouldn't move to Florida the minute they retired, never to be seen or heard from again while they're sitting on a beach all day getting various forms of diseases that they have to go to the doctor and blow all kinds of money on. And then the way that system's set up is just, that's an abomination of both the interactions of the law and corporations that have become very, very powerful in manipulating the law, and lawyers who really like making money and will manipulate the law without really any honor, despite what the bar makes you think they do.
Mm-hmm. And I understand the legal system, but I don't like the principle that they've set up where previous court rulings hold more weight than the law. Law school,
the precedent system, the British legal system.
Right.
What you learn in the law school, it's learning about all these previous mandates and all these previous not so much laws.
Yeah, one judge makes a ruling once, and so it has to rule over the fates of millions.
Yeah, it's so much that they don't want to overturn and question their own kind of, dogmatic narrative that they push, that the courts are justice, therefore we don't want to contradict ourselves. It's so much that, no, if you made a mistake, the law should supersede it. But they prefer their own personal rulings within the court system over the actual law itself. Like that recent thing saying that the Muslim ban was unconstitutional. It's like...
Right. Despite the fact that precedent actually... It clearly says that's not
precedent
true.
actually clearly shows that that's not.
Yeah, I know.
The fact that even the country from which we base most of this off of, the earliest court cases that law students read coming out of England from the 1200s, for whatever reason, we still pay attention to that, but nothing else about history. Interesting. But why are we... They're not even sourcing this material anymore. They've even moved beyond it.
Right, they don't give a fuck
Their
about it.
Their common law is much weaker than ours. Every other common law country, it's very different than the way we particularly enforce the tyranny of dead judges.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone talks about dead white men. Well, there's some dead white men that actually do still have an effect.
Judges,
there wasn't any
white.
alliance issues. Well, yeah, starting with Cardozo, not so white anymore.
Ginsburg is the whitest
judge. Only real
judge.
dorks will get that.
Jesus Christ.
But
it's just, it's all fucked. But yeah, what you're describing, like this idea of like, everybody can just, they'll maintain their cars properly and, save up for their retirement. It's like that would require people to have personal
exactly, and that's where that previous school model of what I said. That's why the largest range of education, I think I said, what did I say, 6th through 12th. I think I said 6th through 12th is all about, becoming that self-actualized person, about figuring out how you can achieve in this system, how you can get the things you want, how you can, yes, self-defense is part of that, and there would be gun clubs and things like that, but assert yourself in a way that a businessman asserts himself, the way that he pushes himself into a market, that if he wants something done, he doesn't wait for it to come to him, he doesn't expect others to do it. He goes and he makes it happen. He goes through the proper channels that initiates that particular change of betterment for himself.
And he humbly deals with constant failure.
Yeah.
Which is another salient aspect of human existence that we've totally tried to purge with some very unusual effects.
I know, and fucking liberals always criticize Trump for, going bankrupt and everything like that. It's like, he's had, 200 successful businesses and 4 bankruptcies. It's like, that's a great track record. Most business owners are like the reverse.
And they always seem to forget about their hatred of that particular legal fiction right then. They always seem to just go, oh, you were the one who was bankrupt, therefore you equal bad.
Mhm.
Okay, weren't you just complaining about how corporations are called humans in the law and that legal fiction that exists to protect the business owners? Hmm. I know
Mm.
Mhm.
ideological consistency's hard.
Mhm. So many
Fuck's sake.
damn reforms we need to make. I think that's almost everything.
Yeah.
However, if you
I
want,
think it's
there's one or two more topics I think that we could cover.
yeah, we definitely could. We all right, we'll move into the second half then. We'll see you guys in just a minute if you're listening to this at the gym.